Hey everyone, it's time for another teledrama video, and this time I'm going to talk about the couples on the show. I know that there's some sort of discrepancy with some of the couples, so I'm going to put the people who were attracted to one another and it was both reciprocated. I'm not including Maria and Mike because he wasn't himself in that, so otherwise it is fair game. At number 18 is Dave and Sky. The entire idea of them not getting together was a good one, but how Dave handles things even before things go awry is just horrible and cringeworthy to watch. And Sky is not the best communicator either, so she is kind of to blame as well, especially with how she intentionally uses his feelings for her as motivation for him to perform well in the finale. You also never really get to know why they like one another in the first place, so it's just unsatisfying on every level. A good idea on paper, but executed horribly in action, but that's most things throughout this season. At 17 is Gwen and Duncan. On paper, the couple is actually pretty solid. They have a lot in common and were friends first, which is a great foundation for a romantic relationship. And when they are together, there is generally a lack of arguing and bickering. The issue is, we rarely see them as an actual couple and get development as a couple, so they fall flat, and the foundation for the relationship is, of course, awful with it being based on cheating. Within like an episode or two after them being a couple, Gwen's booted, so you don't see them develop there. And the less said about All Stars, the better, since that made no sense. At 16, I have Mike and Zoey, which might be controversial because I know they have a huge fan base. I have never been able to care about this relationship. Not only because we really get to see them actually get to know one another before falling head over heels, but I also don't like how they aren't really individuals within that relationship. Zoey is always aiding Mike, and it's like a plus one to him, and Mike only talks about his personalities and how it's a hindrance. You only see their relationship through the lens of his personalities causing issues within it. You rarely get to see Mike as an individual and Zoey as an individual. Also, it being the main focus for 2 seasons was absolutely not needed. At 15 is Gwen and Trent. They were never my favorite couple when I was younger, but I don't like them much at all now that I'm older. They definitely had some nice moments throughout the first season, but I never realized how inconsistent their relationship was throughout that season, and it wasn't done narratively to the point that it actually made no sense. Since sometimes they'd be good, then another moments they weren't, and there's no explanation for it. Or she's mad at him for stuff that happened like 10 episodes ago. I also didn't like how Trent's only purpose was to be Gwen's boyfriend, and how he had no personality or character on his own. And of course, how they ended was horrible too. At 14, I have Courtney and Scott. There was very little setup with them when they first started interacting, and it just seemed very rushed. It also doesn't help that it's a derailed Scott who Courtney ends up falling in love with. Actually, no, falling into like with. Since I think Revenge of the Island Scott would have made for a more interesting, dynamic, and believable relationship. Of course, they break up a few times within the last 3 episodes due to the most contrived manners ever, and you just get nothing out of it. They did have some nice moments in the middle of the season, but it wasn't enough for me. It was also confusing that all of a sudden Scott missed Courtney despite him bashing her in the last episode for her drawing him as a rat and then voting her out. Nothing about it just made sense to me. At 13, I have Ryan and Stephanie. These two are very difficult for me to talk about. I do see some chemistry between them, and they are their own characters, while having some great moments together. I get where they were going with the twist of their storyline, but they became too toxic, and it was very uncomfortable to watch, especially with it being so painfully dragged out. Whatever humor they had was lost out in irritation by that point, but they did get better at the end, as Stephanie started to miss Ryan and was starting to somewhat realize the error of her ways. Despite that, they are still one of the lower couples in my opinion. At number 12 is MacArthur and Brody. I was actually going back and forth about whether to include them on the list, but it was reciprocated on both ends, and they weren't being something or someone else, so I included them. I actually like the idea of the two of them, as both of them are comedic, while MacArthur is more intense, and Brody is a lot more relaxed and naive. When they do interact, it is pretty great, but the issue is, they rarely interact throughout the season, and while they agree to go out at the end of the season, they barely seem like a couple, and many don't consider them to be one. Compare them to the other attractions that formed in the season, like Noah and Emma, and you really see how much they lack. At 11, I have Duncan and Courtney. These two are a mixed bag in my opinion. While they were kind of cliche with the opposites attract vibe they had in the first season, it was very well done, and you ended up rooting for the both of them when they ended up kissing and getting together. Things, of course, took a downturn for them in action, seeing how they both intentionally egged one another on and how no progress was made whatsoever. Their dynamic became more abusive, both of them became a lot more unlikable, and they just got old. Despite that, there were still a few good moments of them in action, but there was nothing left by the time World Tour happened. I liked them initially, but they were never one of my favorites, and they just got very, very old and very uncomfortable. At number 10, I have Dakota and Sam. I do think that they are the more likable and interesting couple from their generation, since Dakota generally learned how to be nicer, and Sam is always there for her. At the same time, I do think that the relationship was very rushed, even more rushed than most couples, and seeing him kind of fetishize Dakota Zoey bumped them down for me, especially when the main reason why he returned was because he wanted to turn into a monster like her. I don't know. They needed more screen time, focus, and development, since Dakota's turnaround against Sam was also rushed, in my opinion. So at number 9 is Carrie and Devin. So I really like the idea of them being best friends, and it's causing for them to eventually fall in love, since there's a certain foundation there that isn't present in relationships that just form as romantic from the start. One, you get to see them as friends, so you see a different dynamic than compared to other couples where that just isn't there. While they did have a few nice moments, and I did like some of the twists and turns that were made in the relationship, it was just way too drawn out for me, and they became either very boring or a very great thing for a lot of the season, and you never really see them as a genuine pair either, and they get together right at the very end. I also don't think that they have the strongest personalities, so that doesn't help, and some of the choices that they both make separately aren't the best. At number 8, I have Lindsay and Tyler. I find them kind of hard to talk about, to be honest. I like them, and I have always liked them, but there's just not much there in my opinion. They were the first couple to ever form and hook up in the series, and it did cause both of their teams to be annoyed with them, but it was barely touched upon, and their relationship and dynamic is never explored upon or developed, as they are always split apart early in the 2 seasons they competed in. The chemistry and funny moments are there, but the depth isn't, and Lindsay forgetting about him whenever she wants to flirt with other men is just pathetic in my opinion. So they end up here. At number 7 is Emma and Noah. So I don't get the hate for this couple, though I would be lying if I said that they didn't annoy me at times. Noah is a sarcastic and interpersonal person, and Emma is a more bitter, serious person who had her heart broken and is guarded, so seeing them get together was interesting to me, and you do see the chemistry there. It was nice seeing other sides to both of them as individuals and seeing how they play off one another, though they did get clingy at times, and then Emma became too competitive for no reason, and then Noah's reaction to that was just a mess. I like them, but they're still very mixed in my opinion. At number 6 is Jasmine and Shawn. Before the season, I never thought that these two would become a couple, and I liked seeing two adventurous outsiders, but with distinct and different personalities get together. Their relationship was very unique, and I liked their interactions throughout the season, since it wasn't like anyone else's in the franchise. Even the scenario about her wanting to share the money and him wanting to keep it added a different layer compared to the other TD relationships. But what does bring them down for me is the horrible stretch in the middle of the season, where she is so mad at him and the situation didn't warrant that type of emotion for so long, and it was just very contrived in my opinion. At number 5, I have Harold and Leshawna. What is interesting about these two is that they're barely together throughout the show, but you do see them flirt a lot, and they have a lot of solid amount of romantic interactions throughout their seasons, and they always go to each other for comfort in a romantic sense. They did not start on the best note, and how they did get together in the first season was rushed, but I honestly put them up here due to action. Their interactions from the next two seasons are just comedic gold, and you can tell that they both still really like one another throughout the entire series, despite them both being single, technically. Shockingly, they are not toxic towards one another at all, and they are both kind of goofy. They have better communication than most couples. It is hinted that they get back together after their early eliminations in World Tour, but they were not a couple for very long on the franchise and didn't get the best development, despite being very enjoyable, so they are here. At number 4, I have Owen and Izzy. What I like about Owen and Izzy is that they were not shoved in our faces compared to the other couples, but the relationship was not really rushed per se, and you could get why they liked one another even from the first few episodes, while creating their own chemistry with one another. They were always a riot with one another, and they did have the issues, but it wasn't anything too toxic or painful, like Owen kind of abandoning Izzy at this white challenge, and she held a grudge, which she rightfully did, and he apologized to her. They were a regular, normal couple who went on with their way of being oddballs and really enjoying one another, which they showed in Total Drama Action, which I actually really liked. I wish they got a bit more focus, and I hated how they broke up, since it was so rushed and it wasn't even a storyline, so you couldn't even get invested into it. They definitely deserved better and more focus, since they were more interesting than many of the other couples. At third is Alejandro and Heather. Alejandro and Heather are two of the most dynamic people to come from Total Drama, and their interactions made the third season. It was clear that they both liked one another from the beginning, but they are very competitive, selfish, and, quite frankly, horrid people, but you never knew what to expect. Sometimes he would be under her spell, and sometimes she would be under his spell. It worked brilliantly in World Tour, but some of the novelty did get lost during All Stars, since they became a bit more toxic, especially in the finale, which was kind of a mixed bag. Definitely a well-developed couple, but I can't put them at the top, because especially we never really see them in a relationship through the show outside of the finale for the most part, and they're so quick to ditch one another for a flimsy chance at money when they're both already eliminated, and it was never going to be something that was actually going to happen anyways. At 2 is Geoff and Bridgette. I personally think that Geoff and Bridgette benefit from never being the main couple, but never being ignored, so they always got consistent focus. They were always like the second or third most important and most visible couple, while being very consistent. I really like how they bonded throughout the first season, and the school guy awkwardness that came from Geoff and how Bridgette reacted to it in the earlier episodes of the first season made them endearing, and then they got to know one another as friends, and then they got together. But once they did get together, the two of them became very annoying and clinky before being unlikable with how they acted during the action aftermaths. And then, of course, you have Bridgette cheating on Geoff and them going through Blaney, which that part was actually very entertaining. I think I like them because they always work through their issues. The aftermaths made them a consistent presence even when they were not in the competition, and even after the main Total Drama series ended, we learned that they are still together and we got updates from Geoff. They are the perfect example of going through trials and tribulations. At first place is Ennui and Crimson. What is so interesting about them is that they never spoke for the first several episodes of their season and seemed like pure fodder. But once they started becoming more vocal and visible, you saw a really supportive, strong, non-toxic couple, and they had been together for a few years up to this point. I think they said they were together for 3 years. It was weird that they didn't see how the other looked without makeup for that period of time, but having to accept one of their natural appearances was nice. They were just very wholesome, unproblematic, and great towards one another, while being great to watch, and you learn more and more about their dynamic. It's easy to see why they are favorites. So that's it for my couples video. It was pretty quick, nice and neat. I'm definitely planning on making a Total Drama characters ranking video where I'm ranking everyone. I don't know how that's going to be like. I might talk about favorite alliances, favorite friendships, Favorite conflicts is definitely one that's going to be up there for sure. I'm also planning on making a few more Renaissance videos as well, so thank you all.